This podcast is sponsored by seedsnow.com. You can go to seedsnow.com and use the coupon code PREP10, PREP10, for an extra 10% off your order. If you've been thinking about buying seeds, you probably want to think about putting your order in sooner than later. Right now, their orders are so much that they're having a bit of a shipping delay, 4 to 5 days. I think between the spring time coming up where people are looking to start planting, and I think that a lot of preppers are looking at what's going on around us and saying, you know what, I think one of the best things I can do on a long-term prepping plan is to start growing my own food. So whether you're an experienced gardener or whether you're a prepper who's just starting out and wanting to grow their own food, go to seedsnow.com and take a look at the great seeds they have. 100% organic, 100% heirloom, 100% non-GMO. These are seeds that you can grow, harvest the seeds, and grow them again the next year. Seedsnow.com. And don't forget to use your coupon code PREP10. Howdy, folks. Rob Hannes here of the Preparedness Podcast, the podcast that brings you the best in preparedness information. You can find us online at thepreparednesspodcast.com, and you can email me directly at rob@prepcast.info. Last podcast, we were celebrating 500,000 downloads, and what I did is I went through some of the comments that I had received, and I didn't mean for it to come off negative. I hope that's not how it came off. I had some comments of people saying, hey, don't let those negative comments get you down. I really didn't take it that way. What I embraced was basically this was an opportunity for me to kind of give some feedback, because there are some things that I'd like to have put out there. Like, for example, I'm not very comfortable speaking. I do have a slight fear of getting in front of the microphone and doing these every week and stuff, which I know seems kind of weird because I keep doing them. But I thought it'd be a good time to take that opportunity and explain some things and point out some things. And you know what? I am completely human and make mistakes. And so when I, have word mispronunciations and stuff, it's like, well, you know what? No big deal. But so I don't want anybody to think that I was trying to be negative. I was just taking the opportunity to respond to some of these comments. And again, I didn't want it to be negative. In fact, I received far more positive comments about people saying, hey, thank you for putting it out. Hey, thanks for information. Thanks for, stuff like that. And I didn't want to do an accolade program, which I know is probably counter to what a lot of other shows do, but I'm just really not wired that way. So I wanted to take the time to address some points because they brought up some things that I had wanted to talk about. So, all right, it's over. It's done. Let's move on. The next podcast I have slated to be the spouse show. Now, not sure if that's going to go because I've been promising this since, as we found out in the comments, way back to October. But it is something I want to do. And so it's on the docket to be done the next podcast. So podcast 167. If you have any questions, and I know we have had some questions that people have sent in before, but if you have any questions that you want my spouse and I to cover, particularly how to get spouses interested in preparedness. And I think that my wife is going to have some interesting commentary on that. But if you have other questions, go ahead and email me at rob@prepcast.info, and we'll throw them at her, and maybe I won't even tell them what they are. We'll surprise her and see what she says. And I can get away with that right now because she's not sitting here in the room. So go ahead and send those in. After that, the next podcast is going to be about guns for survival and preparedness. We had covered this long ago in an earlier podcast, but I thought that with the issues that are going on with the Second Amendment right now, it might be a good idea to look at this again. So if you have any questions or comments or suggestions that you'd like to pass along to the listeners, go ahead and send those on in. Just a reminder, I have cut back the podcast to 1 a week. What I'm doing is I'm taking all my free time that isn't spent on the family or working or the podcast or working on the website, and I'm working on the next book, the Preparedness Capability Checklist. And I've got a lot of stuff I'm basically just editing now. I've got a lot of stuff that went in there, a lot of new content that's gone in there. Because what happened was the PCC was basically just a big list, and not a list of items, but a list of functions and capabilities, as the title suggests. And I didn't want to just put that out. I wanted to have some introductory text, or at least expand on what I had, so that when you're reading the book, you're not left with questions like, well, what does this mean, or how does this happen, or what was I trying to say here? All that needs to be explained. So, when you go through the process of trying to put together a book, it's a lot of editing and a lot of revisions and stuff, because this one is going to print. So once it's done, I want to make sure that it's done. People who buy the print copy, they're not going to have the opportunity to buy an update because it's printed. So making sure, put a lot of time into that. That's why I reduced the podcast to one a week. And once the book is done, then we'll go back to the 2 or 3 that we were doing. It's just far easier for me to get one out, concentrate on the one, and then keep working on the book. Speaking of books, the Preparedness Podcast mini guide on EMP survival is available on Amazon. You can find it on the website. There's some links on there, or it's just easier to go to Amazon.com, search for Preparedness Podcast, and you'll see the book there. For those of you that have already received the book, if you could be so kind to put a review there, preferably and hopefully a favorable review on Amazon. What that does, that helps other people learn what the book is about and whether or not it's worth buying stuff. Got a few on there that are very favorable. I appreciate that. So if you have some time and are so inclined, go ahead and write a review on Amazon so other people know what to expect. And while you're on the internet, head on over to thepreparednesspodcast.com if you haven't signed up for the weekly tips. When you sign up, you are signed up for a weekly preparedness tip, which is much like an article as opposed to just a small, simple tip. You are also signed up for what we call the newsletter, which is an RSS feed of the week's posts, which include the Prepper News Watch and any other information posts and the podcast posts, the show notes that we put out. So if it sounds like I'm kind of out of breath, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying not to rush through, but I was working on this topic, the mobile apps for preppers, and I actually thought this was going to be a fairly easy topic to do a podcast on, because I'm an avid iOS user. I've got an iPad, I've got an iPhone, and there are some apps out there, and I use them all the time. And I thought, hey, it'd be great. I'll just talk about what I know, and it'd be pretty easy. Well, I was doing research last night and going through all the apps that I have, and thinking that, this is great. Oh, this one isn't so good. I wonder if there's a better one out there. And it just kind of led me down one rabbit hole after another. And it turns out that I've got a lot of apps here I want to talk about. And so I don't want to take an hour and a half to do this. So I'm kind of rushing through to try to make sure I can have this podcast finished in a decent amount of time. So without further ado, let's get right into this. At first, it might seem a little odd to be talking about using technology for a genre that is supposed to be low tech and less electricity use and stuff like that. And while that's true, I think the mobile devices have gotten to a point where they become a force multiplier for preppers. We can have a lot of applications on here that provide us instant access to news and information, as well as retrieval of information, and also can be useful as actual physical tools. For example, if you have a light for the phone on your device and you can turn that on via an app, that becomes an expedient flashlight. Likewise, you can just take the screen and just turn the brightness up, and usually that's enough to light a dark room, far better than fumbling around in the dark or trying to go down the stairs in the dark. So they become a point where it definitely makes sense to use them. Now, I love my iPhone, and I absolutely cannot live without my iPad. It goes with me everywhere, simply because it's like a security blanket. But it's because I have longed for this technology to be able to do this for so long, and now that it's here, it's absolutely great. Now, I had long ago. I don't know if anybody remembers this. Probably early, well, this is probably late 1990s, probably about 98, 99. Philips came out with a small computer called the Velo. And I was on the tech support team that was doing the tech support for this device, and it was really cool. It was about the size of a Nexus, but thicker, and it opened up like a mini laptop, like a very small laptop. So it's like, you could say it was like the first netbook, but it didn't have a color display. It was like a blue and black sort of display, but it was very cool because you could put text files on there. I think it could do PDFs. It ran on Palm, which was one of the more popular mobile operating systems at the time. Now, the Velo didn't go very far. We only were doing, I think, for maybe 18 months before they decided to shut it down or something like that. And it's too bad because it was a really pretty cool little device. After that, I moved to a Trio 600, which again is a Palm device, but it was a phone that had a QWERTY keyboard, much like the BlackBerries did. It had an SD card for memory expansion, and it could access the internet, but back then there wasn't too much that you could do with it other than like go to a website or something like that. I was completely enthralled with it because I could store all my prep notes on there, and I went through great pains to figure out how to take my notes from my notes database program, which I had on my Mac, and export them and put them on a secure digital memory card and stick it in the phone so I could pull all that information up. And it was great. And I would show people this, and I would say, look how cool this is. Look, I can do this games, I can do this, I can pull up this information, I can pull up this PDF or whatever. And everybody was like, yeah, that's really great. Then I moved to a Trio 700, which is basically the same thing, just better screen, better memory, better processor, etc. And again, nobody really seemed all that impressed with the fact that I had all this computing power in my pocket. Then the BlackBerries came out, and I didn't have one of those, but then people started doing a lot of it. And I think primarily because businesses bought them for their people, and they were able to basically use this technology without having to pay for it, which I think paved the road for people to become familiar with the technology and start to understand what kind of advantages they have by having it. And then, of course, about 6 years ago, I think it is now, the iPhone came out. And the original iPhone was a hardware device that pretty much ran on software. It was, ahead of its time, despite what you may think about Apple or the iPhone itself. It basically pulled the phone companies kicking and screaming into the 21st century. Prior to that, they had no desire to build a better phone because they figured it's a captured market. We don't have to build anything better. You're going to buy it anyways. And so we had nothing but garbage for years and years and years because they didn't care, because you were paying them anyways. What do they care how well their phones worked? Well, the iPhone changed all that, and it changed it with the software and the fact that Apple made a piece of hardware that was a lot like their computers. It was a piece of hardware, and everything was controlled by software. And they made these little apps to control different aspects of the software, and they threw in a calendar and stocks and a weather app and some other things. And they weren't even thinking that far ahead in that they could open it up. They were caught completely, I think, by surprise at how many developers wanted to build apps for this. Well, let's fast forward to today, and now we've got these tablets, both in iOS and Android, as well as I think BlackBerry's got some out. They're touch interface, which means they're far easier to use. The virtual keyboards take a little bit of getting used to, but once you get used to them, they work nearly as fast. I can type. Actually, I can probably type faster on my iPad than I could ever on my Trio with a physical keyboard, because I don't have to worry about actually pressing. I only have to worry about tapping. And so, but anyways, we now have all this technology, and we have all the interconnection of data, and that's what really drives this technology, is the fact that you can store things in the cloud, and you can access websites and all sorts of data from push servers and stuff. And that really brings this technology to a point where it not only is great for everyday use, but it really becomes a force multiplier for preppers or anybody who wants to carry around massive amounts of information. Okay, so let's start getting into some of these apps and stuff. Now, please keep in mind that I only have iOS devices, iPhone, iPad. I do not have an Android device. I wouldn't mind playing with them. I know some people who have them. I'm a little bit unsure about phablets, which are phone tablets. You know, they're not as big as a tablet, but they're far bigger than a phone. Great screen to do stuff on. Kind of weird to hold it up to your ear, though. But honestly, since I do most things that have nothing to do with talking on the phone, I suppose it's probably pretty decent. But my point is that I don't know how well these Android apps work. Now, I did go to the Google Play Store, play.google.com, and search for a lot of the apps I have, and I did find most of the apps on that store. So I'm sure there's either an exact copy or exact version of the apps I'm talking about on the Android stores, or something that's very comparable. You know, there's an equivalent sort of app that does it. Also, keep in mind that even though I'm talking about specific apps, you know, by name, it doesn't mean that these are the only apps that are available. There are literally millions of apps to choose from, and you're going to need to find the ones that work for you. You may find that what works for me, you absolutely can't stand how that app does whatever it is it does. So, you know, but luckily, or more likely, there is an alternative out there that you can use instead. When I go looking for apps, I find that I use one of two paths. I'm either just kind of browsing through. I have a couple apps that tell me like what apps have gone free for the day. I have a couple other subscription emails, like one from Macworld, and a couple other places that tell me, you know, they're going to give me some insight to what apps are out there for different reasons or whatever. So that's one way to be exposed to apps. You know, you can also just kind of browse around the stores, type in disaster or survival or preparedness or storms or whatever you're looking for and kind of see what's out there. But the other path is trying to find a solution to some function that you need. For example, if you have a lot of information on PDFs and you want to be able to read your PDFs on your mobile device, then you need to have not only some reader that will view the PDFs, but in an effective and efficient manner that maybe allows for bookmarking, or maybe taking the text out of the PDF and putting it into a more readable form, so that it's a little bit simpler to use. So then you can go out and start digging down into what apps would work for that purpose. And I've got a really good example of this on one of the apps we're going to talk about here in a little bit. It was my intention to go through all these apps and specify which were free, which were for pay, and how much they were, as well as, you know, what everything they did and stuff. And quite honestly, I didn't have time. I mean, it took far more time to just kind of outline the basic stuff I'm using and why I like it and stuff like that. So you're going to have to do a lot of the research yourself. If you don't want to pay for anything, I understand, you know, free sometimes works. Like Evernote is free. It's called freemium, which means you get most of the app for free, and then there are some features that you have to pay for. For example, if you're going to store a lot of stuff or sync a lot of stuff in Evernote, I think it's like $5 a month for 1 gigabyte's worth of bandwidth or storage, or however they work out. I'm not really sure. But this illustrates how a lot of the apps work. Sometimes you just have to pay for it. And quite honestly, free apps are nice, but sometimes you got to pay to get the quality. If possible, you should have more than one app that basically does the same thing. So, for example, you should have more than one weather app, more than one news app. If you're storing PDFs on your device, you should have several apps that read PDFs in case, for whatever reason, a version update or something happens and that app stops working or doesn't access this particular type of file. Again, you know, who knows what's going to happen. Your goal is to make sure that regardless of what happens, you can still access your information. one of the reasons I had such a difficult time compiling the show notes for this podcast is because there are so many different ways and so many different apps that allow you to accomplish a task and do it completely differently that I simply couldn't cover everything. In fact, I ended up throwing that portion of the podcast out because it's just like a never-ending rabbit hole. Now, other than having to spend some time finding the apps that work for you, this is actually a really good thing because there's a lot of flexibility and a lot of options that you have available to find the apps that work best for you. Now, for example, on the podcast, I talk a lot about Evernote. I think Evernote is a really good program. I think it's a great way to store your disaster notes or your preparedness notes, be able to archive things off the internet and be able to search and pull that information up easily, simply, and quickly, as well as have it sync to all your devices so that you're typing and doing things on your computer and then it syncs to your phone and you always have that information with you. To me, that is a tremendous advantage. However, I don't use Evernote for my Prepper database. I use a program called DevonThink Pro, which is a Mac-only program. And I use it because it has some features that Evernote doesn't that I like. Particularly, it has AI search or artificial intelligence search, which allows me to categorize and do some fuzzy searching, which I like. Now, they also have an iOS app that allows me to sync that database with my iPad and my iPhone. So I can carry these notes with me, and I have the same sort of searching available, and everything is in the same hierarchical structure that I have it on my computer. So I stick with that because I like it. I use it every day with work and stuff. I put all my work notes in there. If I didn't use it, I probably would use something like Evernote. However, Evernote has some distinct advantages. I think it syncs a little bit faster. Of course, my databases are completely different. My database in DevonThink is well over 1 gigabyte, and Evernote it's only maybe a few megabytes. But Evernote has a lot of things that are attached to it. They have Evernote Hello, which is a contact, a way for you to keep track of contacts and stuff, and they have Evernote Food, and they have Sketch, which is a drawing app which syncs to Evernote. There's a program that isn't related to Evernote called AwesomeNote, which is also a good notes database, but it's primarily for a mobile device, and it syncs to Evernote as a backup. But you can get all sorts of apps that use Evernote. Penultimate, which is another drawing app that allows you to basically, it's not really drawing, it's like handwriting recognition. You can take notes in your handwriting, and it will you'll be able to search for the words because it can read your handwriting. So there's a lot of advantages to using something like Evernote, which is why I made the recommendation, because if you don't know where to start, this is a great place to start. If you're already down this path already, then you probably already have found a solution for it. So the point here is that my workflow isn't necessarily the same as your workflow. So if you don't like the way however app I mention works or performs, there's plenty of alternatives out there, and find something that does fit your needs. Now, as you go about getting these apps, you need to start using these apps on a regular basis. You should use them on a daily basis so you know how they work and how you can use them to their best effectiveness. So if you're in hurricane country, you probably should have several hurricane apps. I mean, I'm not in hurricane country, and I've got like 2 or 3 hurricane apps. And you want to find out which ones provide the best information, the best tracking. Use them so when you need them, you know which app to go to. Same thing with all the other ones. Whatever app provides the best information. Now, I have several apps that I open up specifically for one type of information, and if I'm not looking for that information, I'll open up another app. I mean, they may both be, say, weather apps or note apps, but I use them in different manners because they fit my workflow better. And what's great is that either they're pulling the same type of data, so it doesn't really matter, or in the case of Evernote and this other app I have called AwesomeNote, AwesomeNote syncs to Evernote. So it's like a seamless integration. Whatever I do in AwesomeNote is automatically in Evernote, and I like the way AwesomeNote does certain things, and so I use it, and I'm not giving up anything by doing that. But unless you're using the apps, you won't know that. Try simulating different information needs like injuries, illnesses, survival information. Test these apps out, and one way you can do that is to roll their use into your grid down test. Now, your grid down test is a weekend or at least an overnight where you pretend that you've lost all utilities and you pull out your preps and your prep plan and you make light, entertainment, cooking, cleanup, water, sanitation, all that stuff without the use of utilities to see how well you're prepared. Well, roll these apps into your preparedness weekend. Maybe it's how do I disinfect water? How many drops of bleach do I need to add to a gallon to make it safe to drink? Stuff like that. Try accessing the same information you would need in a real situation to find out how effective they are. And if any of the apps don't live up to your expectations, find a different app. One thing you should do is you should find all the social media outlets for your area. Your city government, your county government, state government, your local emergency services, the fire, the police, all these entities and organizations have social accounts now. Twitter, Facebook, Google+, I don't know, probably Twitter and Facebook are probably the most common. These can be extremely important to have. Now, you probably can go about finding them. I mean, if you have a data connection during a disaster, you can probably go about finding them, but it's going to be much simpler if you can simply either already be monitoring these or turn them on when you're ready to monitor. I know of several people that the only way they got the proper information was the Twitter account for whatever entity was responsible for putting out the information. So, for example, my friends in Flagstaff a couple of years ago, the only way they were able to find out what roads were open and what the problems were with the big snowstorm and stuff was through the Twitter account for the Flagstaff. Actually, I think it was the county Twitter account. They were the ones that were clearing off the roads and stuff. And that's how they got the information. Radio, television, the Friend Network, nobody else had the information. They were able to stay on top of where not to go and what the problems were through the county's Twitter account. So you have to be careful, though, because you can get a lot of disinformation depending on who you're monitoring on these social platforms. So you need to be able to filter this out. And again, this is something you'll learn by actually using them on a daily basis or a semi-regular basis. You may not want to monitor every day, but turn them on occasionally to become familiar with the type of information that's out there. All right, let's cover some issues or some points about actually buying the app. Now, preferably, there's either a free or a light version that you can try before committing with payment. In the iTunes store for iOS, there's no trial period. So a lot of app developers have created these light or free versions, which are basically the same as the paid version, but it has some limited function on it. Like you can only store 10 items or do 12 checks or something. And that gives you an idea of how the app performs before you actually, pay for it. Now, it may be different on the Android side. I don't know. If they have a trial, that's great. But you know what? See if you can try it first. Otherwise, check out the reviews, see what other people are saying. I always check out the negative reviews because I think they're more descriptive than the positive reviews. If you see a string of people saying crash, 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 or, it lost my data, I entered all these notes and then next time I opened the app, all my data was gone, all my notes were gone, you may want to skip that app. Another thing that reviews can tell you is how good the information is on the app. So, for example, I was checking out some preparedness and survival apps last night, and you'll have this app and it looks good. It's got a great icon and good cover art, and the description is really well done. So it makes it sound like, yeah, this is definitely something I think I'd like to have. And it's like, $1, $2, $3, which isn't much, but it adds up. So I don't just buy just anything. So I was looking through the review, and most of the reviews are favorable, but you can buy favorable reviews, so that doesn't tell me anything. So I'm looking at the most critical reviews, and there were only a few, but they were very specific in that, this app is garbage because blah, blah, blah. And you need to evaluate based on those type of feedback. Now, one, I don't know if I would take any heed to, but when you get several or a bunch of them, and especially if they're all talking about the exact same thing, then that's something you may want to reconsider and move on to the next app. Another thing to keep in mind is that because these apps you may very well be needing during a disaster, for any app that has information that you might be needing during those times, make sure that information is there when you don't have a data connection. So you can test it by turning off the Wi-Fi or the cell signal on iOS devices. There's an airplane mode. I think there's on Android too. But you turn on the airplane mode, that turns off the wireless connection, and then you can test these apps to see if the information is there. Some do, some don't, some are kind of there. And I tested some of these last night, and we'll talk about them coming up in the ones I've shown. But it's important to know that the information that might be critical for you, like, say, first aid information, you want to be able to have that on the device without having to download anything at the time you need it, because you might not have a connection. If you're on Android, I have to warn you to be careful about what you download. There's no gatekeeper there with Android apps. On the Apple side, Apple takes a look at these and no, they're not foolproof. We do get some that come through, but it's a much cleaner system. I'm much more comfortable doing that than I would with, say, like an Android system. So just be careful. Make sure that you're reading reviews and make sure you're checking out that they're from at least somewhat reputable companies before you download and open up your information to it. Make sure you check out when the last update for the app was. If it wasn't recent, then it could be a good chance that it's a zombie app, meaning that it's there, you can download it, but there aren't any more updates. Now, this could be because the app is so good and it does what it's supposed to that it doesn't need any updates. Or it could mean, and this is more likely the scenario, that the developer has stopped supporting it, and so if there are any bugs or if an operating system update creates that app from running anymore, then it won't be updated, so you may have either lost your money or lost some functionality that you were counting on. You need to be wary of apps that are charging money for public domain information. For example, you can get the Army Survival Manual FM 2176 for free as an app, which is fine. Some apps are actually charging you for that same information. However, you can also get this same manual as a PDF, just upload it to your device and read it with any number of apps that read PDFs, including being able to search for text and stuff. So there's alternatives you need to look out there. I wouldn't pay for any information that you absolutely don't need. As I had mentioned, I had a feeling this was going to be a long podcast, and so I've been trying to rush through it without actually sounding like I'm rushing through it. We're at the 33-minute mark. What I'd like to do is pause briefly for another sponsor and then come back and go over the list of useful apps that I use. We're talking about mobile apps, and some of these apps will help you get better prepared. Some of them will help you with preparedness information. Some will even help keep track of your pantry, your storage food. But you need to have some storage food in order to keep track of it. And when you're looking at expanding your current food storage plan, take a look at buyemergencyfoods.com. I've had a bunch of these meals, and I got to say, they really do taste good. I like the fact that they're lightweight, so I can carry a bunch of them in a pack without it increasing the weight too much. They are sealed in this special Mylar bag that blocks out the oxygen. It has a shelf life of up to 25 years. There's a very low oxygen content in the pouch itself, which means that the food is going to be tasting as fresh and as good as possible much longer down the road. I like this food. It's a great addition to any food storage plan. And when you're looking at the type of food that takes a minimal amount of preparation so that you're evacuating or you're doing something that doesn't allow you to take the time to cook, this is the food that you should be looking at. That's buyemergencyfoods.com. Now, I'm not going to put these apps out in any particular order because I just started writing them down as I was going through my devices here. They're not even in alphabetical order. They're just kind of how it kind of brain dumped out of my head. So the first I have here is news apps. Now, this requires a data connection because it's going to be pulling current news down. You should have local news. Go out and find. I would venture that nearly every local news channel has an app nowadays. And you should probably have all of them. I have all the local news stations on my phone. I have them set to give me news alerts, so when something happens around town, it pops up on my phone. They clearly have different priorities. One of the stations here, they're solely focused on this trial that's going on that I have no idea what it is. I've never heard of her, and I don't know why it's so important. But there'll be other things going on, but this is the only thing they'll put news alerts out on. Other ones will do a variety of stuff, and they're not very consistent. So it's like they've got one person who does this, and whenever they happen to be at the computer, they'll put out a news alert. I keep them, though, because if there's a major disaster that hits the city, chances are these news companies are going to put out a news alert and it'll come through. Also, you should have some nationwide news channels, CNN, Fox News, USA Today, whatever you want to get them from. I actually have all of those because, again, they all have different priorities. They all have different perspectives on what they feel is important. And when they put their news alert out, not all of them may put out the same news alert, but you only need to be alerted once to something that you're interested in. And I also think you should have some worldwide news apps. The one I have is BBC. I like their news stuff. I can actually, the one I have actually, you click on a button, you can actually listen to BBC Radio, which I kind of like, coming from my shortwave days. But you need a way to gather this information, and those apps will help you. Additionally, you should look at news aggregators. Now, an aggregator is basically something that takes different sources and sticks them all into one area for you. So, for example, probably the most popular or most widely recognized would be Google Reader. There is a Google Reader app on Android, but not for iOS. But there are plenty of other apps that allow you to use your Google Reader account, like Flipboard. I love Flipboard. Flipboard allows me to take my Google Reader, and I have a ton of stuff in my Google Reader. Now, I'm sorry, let me back up. Google Reader, what it does, it allows you to take the RSS feeds from nearly any website and stick it in your reader, and what it does is it aggregates that data. So what that means is it will pull information from every website that you fed into it and will display it in chronological order. So you may have CNN and Fox News and your local news channels and BBC and maybe Survival Blog and the Preparedness You have all these RSS feeds in Google Reader. Well, Google Reader will go out to all these different feeds, pull in the information, and sort it in chronological order. So when you're flipping through or scrolling through, you're looking at all the information that's come out from these websites. Flipboard does the exact same thing, only in a much more pleasing to view and easier to use manner. So basically, you flip through pages like you would a book or a newspaper or something like that. A couple other ones out there are News 360 and NetNewsWire. Now, NetNewsWire is a Mac and iOS only app, but Flipboard and News 360 are available on Android. Now, if you don't already have a Google Reader account, you're going to have to sign up for one, and you're going to have to fill it with all sorts of RSS feeds, all these websites. But once you do, it's a great way to constantly get new information, and you don't have to go through it every day. It will update whenever you go to it, so it will always be pulling the most recent information first. You could set it to do the oldest first, but if you set it to newest first, then you're constantly looking at whatever is there. Flipboard, by the way, will also allow you to add Twitter feeds and Facebook feeds, which means that you can go through your Facebook account and your Twitter account, or even hashtags. You can add a Twitter hashtag as a new board, and you're looking at all the information that's coming through. So it's a very effective and efficient way of viewing all this information in one place. The next set of apps I have are the weather apps. I have a bunch of these because they show different information differently, and I like some for different reasons. For example, when I want to just see radar, I'll either pull up My Radar, Weather Radar, that's the name of the app, or NOAA Radar US. I think both of these are available in Android, although I had a hard time finding an exact match for the NOAA one. But I also have AccuWeather, Intellicast, the Weather Channel, Weather Underground, and WeatherBug. And I use them differently. Sometimes I just poke around and see what's there. I do have one other weather map that I find extremely useful. It's called U.S. Weather Maps by Easy Apps Inc. It is available on both platforms, though I can't tell you whether or not it works exactly the same on the Android app. I will have a link in the show notes to this because I didn't find it on the Google Play Store, but they do have an Android app. Now, while most of the other apps, they all provide the same type of information, this app is distinctly different. It will show you the actual weather maps, much like those that we used to see on weather forecasts and stuff, where they had like the fronts, warm front, cold front, occluded front, and sort of forecast maps where there's like plus 6 hours, plus 12 hours. These are the types of maps that I'm used to seeing and I find highly useful, especially when I want to kind of make my own prediction or my own forecast as to what type of weather may be coming, particularly like for wind and severe weather outlooks, because they have those maps as well, and even maps like for dew points and humidity and all the great stuff that we used to have, 10, 20 years ago before all the weather reports came out looking like, the USA Today maps, which are nice, but they are short on details. In addition to all this, it also has one very nice feature where you can add a map URL to the program, and it will display that as well. So when you punch the little map list, it'll have it there. This makes it particularly useful because what I've done is I've loaded a wind profile map into it, which gives me a very good indication of where any airborne contaminants might go, say, for example, radioactive fallout. And I'll have it in the show notes how to do this, but you go to Weather Underground, which is wunderground.com, and you basically go to the radar and you pull up a specific type of radar, and it actually says, view or save this map. You click on that, and what it does, it reloads that map by itself. Then you can copy that URL, get it onto your device, probably by sending yourself an email, and then taking that URL and sticking it in here and naming it something like Fallout Map. And what this particular map does, it gives me a vertical profile of the wind direction and the wind speed, which is extremely important if you're going to try to predict the fallout patterns, because the wind that you feel down here at ground level has nothing to do with the wind that you need to be concerned with as far as what's pushing particulate matter in the upper air winds. So I really like this for this reason. Now, yes, it needs a data connection, but I'm going to guess that even in a nuclear war or even a nuclear detonation in the city, I will probably still have a data connection for at least a little bit, and that'll be one of the things I pull up first. Moving along, there are some government or non-governmental organization apps. These two need a data connection. The first is Red Cross came out with a shelter app, which allows you to find American Red Cross shelters. You also have a FEMA app. Now, the shelter app I didn't find on Android, but I did find the FEMA app, and there is some offline capability with that one. But what the FEMA app does is it allows you to find shelters. It has some information on what to do before, during, and after disasters, how to build kits. Additionally, you can apply for assistance and check out maps for where the recovery centers are. You can access their blogs and social sites. So this is one of those apps that you probably would want to have after a disaster, like say Hurricane Sandy, when you're trying to figure out where you can go to get information. I know that when I was a victim of a flood, finding out where to go to find information was extremely frustrating because there was no place to put. You kind of had to drive around or word of mouth until you found something. So something like this could be extremely useful. The next set I have here are first aid and medical apps. Again, the American Red Cross has a first aid app. It has videos in it, and the entire app is offline capable, including the videos, which I thought was really nice. There is an app called iTriage. It has some offline capabilities, but that allows you to kind of look at conditions and symptoms and try to self-diagnose. Both of those are available on the Android store. One of my favorites is the Merck Manual Home Edition. It's completely offline capable. All the information is actually stored on the device. Now, the Home Edition is not available on Android, though there is the full edition available there in some other app from a different company. It's like $50. It's like far more money than this Home Edition, and the reviews for it basically says it stinks. So you need to be careful, because just because something costs money, even a lot of money, doesn't mean it's going to be any good. Now, if you have an iPhone or an iPad, the Merck Manual is $10, which is one of the more expensive apps that I have. But I think it's money well spent, because I have several print versions of the Merck Manual, including a Merck Veterinary Manual. And I really like this book. It's a well-done book. Lots of medical information in it. The Home Edition is easier to read, which I think would be important during times when I would really need it. And so I'm comfortable spending this kind of money for information like this. The other app that I have is WebMD, also available on Android. And it has some offline capability, a lot like the First Aid and iTriage. There are, though, tons of other first aid apps. And I've used these. I like these. I think they provide decent information. But, there are others out there. If they're free, download and give it a whirl and try it out. Sometimes that's the only way you're going to know whether it's worth it or not. Next group of apps here I've kind of loosely grouped together under the heading of survival information. One of them is 3D Sun. It's available on both platforms. This is the app where I get my solar flare and coronal mass ejection alerts from. If you follow me on Facebook, right around Thanksgiving, I posted an actual screenshot of my iPhone with an alert that basically was talking about a CME headed for Earth. That's the app that I use to keep track of that. It's got some really great pictures of the sun from the solar observatories that we have orbiting it right now. So it's kind of neat from a science standpoint, but it also is highly effective for knowing when we have CMEs or solar flares headed our way. In this category, the American Red Cross has a couple other apps. One's called Earthquake. The other one's called Hurricane. And they're actually pretty decent little apps. They have some offline capability. The nice feature is that you can tie these into your Facebook and Twitter and texting and email accounts, or not email accounts, but where you can send out emails. So basically you can create one message and have the app post to your Facebook, your Twitter, send out a text, and send out an email all at once to let people know that you're safe. That's what they call it. I'm safe. I thought it's kind of nice so that you could just do it once and not have to worry about it. It also contains a feature to brighten your screen to use as a flashlight and an audible alarm to attract attention. So, if you're in rubble or you're stuck or something, instead of screaming until your throat's raw and you can't make any more noise, this is a noise or an attraction device that you can set up. I don't know how effective they would be, but at least there's some thought behind that I thought was pretty well done. If you do have a data connection, you can locate shelters. It also tells you of recent earthquake activity, although it's really not great at showing you what the earthquakes are and stuff. It has some information how to make a plan, how to make kits for earthquakes or hurricanes, and what to do before, during, and after disasters and stuff. It links to the Red Cross First Aid app if you have that. So overall, it's not bad. It's probably, they're free. They're probably worth having in case you find yourself, needing stuff like this. It's better to have it than not to have it. Another couple earthquake apps I have are Epicentral and Quake Info. These two apps are okay. They show me where the earthquakes are on a map, and they show me a listing and stuff. And it's nice to be able to sort them by the biggest earthquake first. There's probably apps that are better. I'll just be honest, I haven't really gone and searched for any because I don't look at earthquakes too much, and these do provide basic information on this. The other hurricane app I have is called iHurricane HD by hurricanesoftware.com. It's pretty decent. They keep improving it, which is why I keep it, because eventually I think it'll be a really good app. But it provides, maps and paths and projected tracks and stuff like that. So it's pretty decent, especially since I'm not actually in a hurricane zone. Again, there's probably a better one out there, but this one suffices since I'm not actually in a hurricane zone. Another one is called IRPG. It is available on, actually I think all these are available on the Android platform, except for maybe a couple. This one is Incident Response Pocket Guide. It's a wildland firefighter reference app. If you're not a wildland firefighter, you may not actually have any interest in it, but there is some information that you could glean from it, especially if you're trying to form a group, a preparedness group. There's different communication protocols and things like that. I find it interesting. There's a knots 3D app which tells you how to tie a whole bunch of different knots. I mentioned this before. It's called Survival Guide. Again, available on both platforms. It's basically the Army FM 2176 Survival Guide. It's free, so highly useful. Lots of good information in it. There's an app here that I believe is only available on iOS called WikiHow. It's a how-to and DIY survival kit. It's not just survival information. There's a whole lot of other stuff in there. The basic premise of the app is to teach you how to do a bunch of things in a wide variety of topics. I'm pretty sure it's free, so it's worth a download. It does have a lot of survival information in it, and it's got some videos and stuff. It does need a data connection, but again, free, I think, and so it's worth checking out. Another app by the American Red Cross is called Wildfire. And this one is nearly identical to like the earthquake app, but for wildfires. I'm not sure if it came out recently or if I missed it before. I just downloaded it a couple days ago when I was poking around for some more apps. But it lists all the wildfires that are happening, and so I'm looking forward to checking this out this summer because we usually have wildfires here in the desert Southwest. Next app here I have is called Wiser, and it is available for both platforms. It's from the National Library of Medicine. This is a particularly useful app to first responders and emergency medical service personnel, but it contains a lot of information about chemicals and substances. Now, you may not think you may be like, why do I need that? But in addition to chemicals and those things, it also contains information on nuclear, biological, and chemical agents, which is very handy to know like what the half-life is and what the toxicity of certain chemicals are. This newest version they came out with has a mapping plot where you can plot where the spill is and tell it what the wind direction is, and it'll tell you what the immediate evacuation area is. So if you play around with it, you can kind of get an idea of how bad certain chemicals are and stuff. I find it's interesting if you travel down the interstate and you see the placards on the tankers or some trucks that's got these numbers on them, you can look up the number and find out exactly what's in that truck. A new app that I actually downloaded today, and I'm not sure how I missed this one before, but it might be simply because there are hundreds and hundreds of these types of apps out there. This one is called Disaster Alert. It's by Pacific Disaster Center. It is available on both platforms. I'm actually quickly liking this app because when you first open it, you see a map of the world and you can zoom in and out, and it will show you a little icon for all the disasters that are occurring. And if you learn the disasters, it's like drought and wind and thunderstorm and volcano and stuff. But you can also configure it to give you an alert so that when a disaster happens, it will pop up on your phone, and you can keep track of what's going on. It's actually quite handy. I've only been using it, like I said, today, but so far I'm liking it a lot. The next section of apps I have are for note-taking and file retrieval. Not all of them are probably going to meet what you would consider a prepper need, but I look at this as from a standpoint of everyday need. So, for example, I use 1Password on my Mac to keep track of all the passwords I use on all the different websites I go to. And what this allows me to do is to have one master password that unlocks 1Password, and then 1Password will go ahead and fill in all these other passwords for me, which allows me to have much more complex and harder to crack passwords for all my websites and accounts. Well, there's an iOS app, and I keep it on there mainly because if I need to look up a password, I can do so. Now, it does have a web browser that allows me to have pretty much the same functionality as on my computer, but it's there so I can look up any information I have in there, because I can also keep secured notes, bank account information, credit card information. It's all highly secured, and so I can keep that information with me should I ever need to retrieve it. Additionally, some of the other programs I talked about, AwesomeNote, DevonThink2Go, Evernote, those are all note programs that you can use to create notes on your computer and sync to your mobile versions. Now, another aspect you can do, and we've talked about this before, if you're not using Evernote and syncing to your mobile devices, whatever you're using, if you can output or export as PDFs or HTML or text files, a lot of times you can take those files and transfer them to your mobile device and then just view them on your device itself. So that's a way that you can take all your prep notes and your preparedness database with you. Unfortunately, this next app is not available on the Android platform, but is a really good example of the type of app you should be looking for functionality on your mobile devices. And it's called Goodreader. Now, Goodreader is billed basically as a PDF reader, but you can mark up the PDFs and resave them. It syncs with Dropbox and SkyDrive and SugarSync or many other servers. So you can even log in through FTP or SFMTP or a WebDAV server. You can sync the entire folders from those servers or just individual files. It supports a lot of file types, so you can dump a lot of things to it. PDF files, text files, Word files, PowerPoint files, Excel spreadsheets. It does iWork, it does HTML, it does images. It will even play audio and video. So it's kind of a one-stop shop, being able to send files to your mobile device and still be able to access them. One of the features that I like is the PDF. It reads PDFs really well, but a feature it has is it basically strips out all the text and puts it into one big flowing document. So if you have a PDF that has, say, like 3 columns of text, yes, you can zoom in, then you scroll down, then you have to, scroll to the right and zoom back up to the top so you can continue reading. This program will take all that text out and make it one big flowing document for you to read in a much simpler form. Very powerful. I really like this app. I send all sorts of files. In fact, that self-reliance illustrated magazine that we talked about several podcasts back, I get the PDFs for that. I send it to Goodreader, and that's how I read it. I read it on my iPad. It's great. It's the classic example of what functionality you should be looking for in apps. So you're paying for it a little bit, but it provides so much functionality that you can use it over and over and over again. Speaking of cloud storage, I think all these places like Dropbox, Google Drive, SkyDrive, I think all these have mobile apps that allow you to remotely access your files that are stored in these places, which I think is really important because, if you lose the the stuff in your home through earthquake, flood, fire, you still can access this stuff because it's all off-site storage. Okay, we're coming up on an hour. This is absolutely the longest podcast I've done since I've rebooted the podcast. I still have a lot of apps to do. I'm just going to cover some of these. You can find out the rest in the show notes and go check them out, and you can read the descriptions for a much better probably description than what I'm going to give. But some of the things are mapping apps, GPS, compass, stuff like that. A lot of these are great to have. They do different things. Gas Buddy, I think, is an important one because it can show you where gas stations are around you. So if you suddenly find yourself without gas, you can look that up. Some of these programs allow you to upload PDFs to them. Some of them download topo maps, like My Topo Maps from Trimble. They're all highly useful sort of map programs. You have calculator apps. Of course, you want to be able to calculate. Wolfram Alpha is really great for finding unique information. I've got an Ohm's Law calculator, which is great for calculating electronic and electrical needs. One of the ones I have, and I don't think there's one on Android, but if you could find one that's similar, it's called Magical Calculator Pro, and basically it allows you to set up algorithms so that you can just punch in numbers. And what I've done in this one is I actually set it up to calculate radioactive decay rates and stuff like that. So it's really cool. So all I need to do is enter some data, and I get future calculations. It's really pretty powerful. Additionally, I've got social apps, health and fitness apps, a bunch of miscellaneous apps, including a nice flashlight app that turns on the camera light and stuff. I'm going to skip all these. You can go to the show notes and look at them, and if they intrigue you, you can look them up. One app I want to talk about real quickly before I close this out is a food storage app called Prep and Pantry. Now, I have not used this app very much. I only downloaded it a couple days ago. Back when I was looking at stuff like this a couple years ago, there really wasn't all that much that seemed worth checking out. This app seems pretty cool. You can scan your items in via barcode. If it doesn't recognize the barcode, you can go ahead and enter it manually, and then it will remember what that barcode is. So the next time you scan it, you don't have to enter it in again manually. Also, you can create your own barcodes. If you have a barcode labeler, you can create your own barcode, stick it in there, and again, it will enter it once, and then it'll scan the barcode from then on out. There is a light version that you can download for free and try it out. I think it allows you to track up to 10 items, which will give you some form of familiarity with it and how it works. There is no Android version yet, but according to the website, prepandpantry.com, an Android version is expected. You can even sign up for a little email notice when it's available. Another way of keeping track of your food storage is to use Evernote, like we covered in episode 132, organizing your storage and preparedness supplies. I went over how I keep track of my bulk food storage using Evernote. And this just illustrates that there are a good number of apps out there that can accomplish the same task. The mobile device, the phones, the tablets, and the software have gotten to a point where they really are a force multiplier for the prepper. It allows us to be able to access current information as it's happening. It allows us to contact massive amounts of people through the social networks. We can store preloaded information, first aid, medical, survival information on these devices with very little space taken up. And I think most importantly, we can take our own information, the notes and the lists that we create, and store it in a variety of places that is synced everywhere. So I can type a list of items that I need to make sure that I have on hand and need to buy in case of a winter storm approaching. And I don't have to worry about trying to recreate that list because I'm at work. I can just go to my mobile device, my phone or my tablet, pull up that list, and have that information instantly available. As we come up on the 1 hour and 5 minute mark, this has definitely been the longest podcast since the reboot. I could go on for another 30 minutes talking about the rest of these apps. However, I've already covered the most important. To see the rest of them, go to the show notes at thepreparednesspodcast.com. And until next time, enjoy life, and be safe.